I like being a journalist because you get to really know what's going on in your community. You get to meet fascinating, interesting people. And I'm a little nosy also. I like to know what's going on behind the scenes and what makes people work, what makes them tick, and what's going on. And being a journalist really gives you access to knowing all of those things and knowing how things work.
Hi, I'm Marianne Zalesnik, and I work every day to find the answers to questions that people need to know to make informed decisions. I'm the news director at WVXU, and my job is to gather and present news and information that's been verified and can be used to help people make better decisions about their lives and the community. This is just one step to maintain a vital democracy in the United States. One major role of journalists is to objectively research and report on events the public wants and needs to know about. As an independent monitor, journalism serves as a watchdog over those whose power and position most affect citizens. In the next few minutes, you'll see journalists at WVXU talk with students about journalism. Our goal is to show you the process we take as we explore subjects and present our findings to our listeners. We also hope to show you the importance of journalism as a possible career choice. As our news outlets expand, there's a real need in America and all around the world to find passionate truth seekers and storytellers to keep the growing free world informed and empowered. That mighty responsibility all starts with the individual journalist in search of answers about a particular story.
The thing I like about being a journalist, and I enjoy this more than anything else, is when I do a story, whether it's on the air, whether it's on the web, and I have people come up to me in a restaurant or in a grocery store or some other kind of setting and say, "Hey, I heard you on the radio," or I read your story on WVXU.org. I really like that. I learned something. And if they say I learned something, to me, that's like a good day.
I'm a general assignment reporter at WVXU. I'm also currently, for a little while longer, our digital news editor, which means I do all of the stories that everybody else who has a regular beat, they have their stories and I get what's left. So I get to do a wide variety of stories, which I really enjoy. One day I might be doing politics, the next day I might be doing environmental news, and I also help keep an eye on our content on the internet.
I'm the politics reporter at WVXU, and I cover obviously elections, candidates. I write columns for the website. I do appearances on our Cincinnati edition show. I'll do stories for the air, and just try to keep on top of what's happening in the world of politics.
The best tool in your toolkit is the word why. Why is that? Why did this happen? Why are you doing this? Why is it this way? And just keep asking why until you get to the heart of the matter.
I think the most important thing for young journalists is the curiosity, the desire to find out, to answer questions that you have. Because if you have those questions, many other people have those questions. And if you can find the answers to them, you've not only done yourself a service, you've done untold thousands of people a service. Knowledge is power, and that's what we have to make sure people understand. The more you know, the more powerful you can be.
I'm Caroline Horvath. I go to Walnut Hills High School. I'm a sophomore. I live with my parents and my sister. I have a goldfish.
Well, I also go to Walnut Hills with Caroline. I'm a junior. This is my third year in journalism. I have a twin brother that also goes to Walnut Hills. And I also do a couple other things on the side. I'm in the Student Congress, the student governing body, and in the Model United Nations Committee, which is a lot of fun, I think.
What is journalism and the role of media?
What is journalism?
What is journalism? The big question.
Journalism is basically the gathering and dissemination of news. And it's, to me, one of the most important functions in a society, because we live in a great big society, a very diverse society, And we need that kind of information, and we need it from a variety of sources, not just one medium against another medium, but from various sources. So it's a way of basically educating the public and telling them, okay, here's some things that we think you need to know as a citizen. And we make those decisions. We're kind of the gatekeepers on that.
Mm-hmm. And documenting history for all of the generations to come after
That's
us,
right.
so that they know what happened. And
We do the first draft of history.
there you go.
So how would you define media today versus media 50 years ago or even 100 years ago? How are people receiving the news, and how are you telling the news?
There are so many different
Well, yeah,
ways
that's-
to get
yeah.
your message across today, as opposed to 50, 100 years ago when it was basically in the newspaper and you had multiple newspapers in an outlet. You had a daily, an afternoon, an
Yeah.
evening, a morning paper. Now, of course, with the internet, and you've got the advent of television and radio and blogs and everything, you really have to be a good consumer of the news to make sure that what you're getting is coming from a reliable and a reputable source, and actually a news source, not just somebody who decided they wanted to call themselves a journalist and write a blog or whatever.
It was easier, and like say, I'm older. I mean, I've been around. I can remember, the time when there were 3 television networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. That was it. You turned on the TV, you were going to either see Walter Cronkite on CBS deliver the news, or Huntley and Brinkley on NBC, and you were limited to that, and the newspapers, basically the local newspapers, which in those days had more of a political slant, I think, than they do these days. And I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. There were 2 newspapers: the Journal-Herald, which was considered, its editorial page was considered a Republican newspaper. The Dayton Daily News, which still survives, was more of a Democratic paper. But it's like Tana says, there were fewer outlets, and there are so many more now with the advent of the internet, where everybody can call themselves a journalist and go on and start posting things, oftentimes without regard to the truth. And people have to be very careful about what they see on social media sites and the internet that's passed off as news.
How do you recommend that the general public and high schoolers like us, how do we differentiate from news compared to someone's opinion that they just put on the internet?
Well, sometimes you can look at, I've been amazed at some of these websites that will put stories up about, some crazy thing that they said happened. Like a few weeks ago, Ringo Starr was allegedly saying, yes, Paul McCartney died in 1966, and people were sharing this on Facebook and going, oh my God, we heard this years ago and we didn't believe it, but here it is. It's on the internet. It must be true. We opened that site up, and if you scroll down to the very bottom of it, there was in small print, something that says this is a satirical website. There is nothing even remotely resembling the truth on this website. I mean, you have to be more discerning. You have to, look at these websites in terms of, okay, who's doing them, who's controlling them, who's actually putting the product out. And in most cases, they'll tell you, we're lying to you.
Well, and a lot of times you can just look at what especially if you're on Facebook or whatever, you can see where the link is coming from. If it's not a reputable source that exists, then that's your first clue that it's probably not valid. But then, go to the site, check it out, or frankly, just look it up on the internet. Can you find more than one source that is claiming whatever it is that you're trying to verify? If you can't, it's probably not true.
What makes an appropriate source for a story? Like, what do you look for in a source to make sure that it's reliable and accurate?
Yeah, I mean, you need to vet your source. You need to make sure that what they're telling you is true and that you can believe them and that they are who they say they are. Now, on the local level, it's a little easier, I would think, because like Howard said, you've cultivated a lot of your sources over the years. On the national level, you might be, or international level, you might have to do a lot more research on who you're talking to.
Yeah, sometimes you'll talk to someone and they'll give you information and you're not quite sure. You don't know that person that well, so maybe you have to go to somebody else and confirm, what this person is telling you and get more than one source.
And check every source on every story. I mean, I'm doing a pretty lighthearted thing at the moment right now, which has me sending emails to Germany just to try and confirm this one little bit of a story.
Yeah.
But check everything.
Right.
How many sources do you try and get for each story?
Oh, it depends on what you're working on.
Depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Depends on what it is. If it's something really serious that, you've got with a big impact, you try to get 2 or 3 sources to tell you, people that are, you want to get them on the record. But sometimes you can't, and you can only get them to talk on background, which means that you don't quote them directly, but the information they're telling you is usable. But the bottom line is, and this is the rule ever since I first did this, whether it's here or at a newspaper, is you do not put anything on the air or in print until you are absolutely 100% certain that you are right about everything. Completely right. That you have total faith in what you have just written. And total faith, and that means total faith in the people you're talking to too. So
You got to be able to stand behind your work.
Absolutely.
Why did you choose journalism over something else you might have been interested in?
Like a lot of journalists, actually, I kind of fell into it. It wasn't necessarily something I thought I was going to do. I have a general communication degree with a writing certificate in journalism, which is what the college I went to offered at the time. And I went to grad school for mass communication, thought I'd learn how to use cameras. Didn't really happen. However, I did get an internship working at the radio station at the school I went to grad school at. And that turned into something that I love to do, and an opening came up at the same time that I was graduating. And so I kind of moved right into it and fell in love with the public radio medium and the way that we tell stories in public radio and the longer format and the telling people's stories.
I went off to college. I was one of those rare people who actually knew exactly what they wanted to do. I wanted to be a reporter, and I set out to do that. And somehow I managed to succeed at doing that.
For any high school journalists or future journalists out there, what are journalism basics, like the skills or the knowledge that they need before they can even step into a journalism lab?
You got to be nosy. You have to be curious.
All right.
I always say the best thing that you can ask is why, and don't just stop at one why. Somebody will tell you the first thing they think of off the top of their head or what they think they're answering your question, like I think I'm doing now. And then your next follow-up is why, what do you really mean by that? And just keep going, and ultimately you'll get to that perfect, not that perfect, but you'll get to the heart of what it is that they're about, what it is they're really, why they do the thing they do.
Yeah, and two, I think you have to think of every story as if you were a reader or a listener. What would the reader or listener, what would you want to know? That, if you answer those questions, the questions that you have, then you're probably going to answer the questions that folks out in the public who are consuming the news are going to want to know. I mean, you have to identify with the people that are listening to you, watching you, reading you. and you have to think about them. You have to think about them every time you start to work on a story. Who's going to read this? Who's going to hear it? Who's going to see it?
So once you've written a story, how do you get it out there? How do you, maybe this is just a problem for us, but our online website, no one looks at it. Like my mom looks at it. I look at it like every day.
Yeah, we have that problem too. So if you find out the answer, let us know.
Yeah, I mean that can always be a problem, and it's going to be a problem with what essentially the Chatterbox at Walnut Hills is a print publication, and people were used to picking it up and opening it, and turning the pages and reading the stories. Now you've got, it's going to take a long time to convince people to make that transition to look at it online. And maybe you start with, some of these younger, the younger grades at Walnut Hills, the 7th and 8th and 9th graders, they might be more likely to do that. But it is difficult, but obviously it's not impossible.
So what do you think makes a good story?
Well, what I think makes a good story is a story that people walk away from either listening to it or reading it and look at each other, or look up and say, I actually learned something here. I know something now that I didn't know before, and it was valuable to me. And that requires good reporting. That requires having a news organization, and I think WVXU is one of those, that has the credibility that when people hear something on our air, that they can trust it.
And I really enjoy doing human interest reporting or stories. So I think that the people are what make the story. We have the luxury of using audio in our pieces, being very radio focused. So I think to let the people tell their stories as much as possible in their own voices really helps bring across the story in the best way possible, and makes it feel more authentic and helps the listener connect with something. So I like to let people tell their stories in the most powerful way possible.
Going back to your work as a journalist, what is your average day? The big cliche question: what is a day as a journalist?
I'm not sure what an average day is. I mean, it depends. It depends on what's going on. There can be days that are very slow. There can be days where you're, nonstop, or you've got multiple stories breaking. We're a fairly small staff, so there's only so much we could cover.
In general, around here, wake up, check the news, see what happened overnight. We at WVXU have a daily news meeting. Well, there's a daily news update that's sent out every morning that kind of lays out the things that we know are going on for a day, a news budget. We have a news meeting every morning to discuss what all was in that news budget, who's covering what, and what did we maybe miss, what do we not know that we don't know at that moment, what should we be thinking about reporting on. And then you probably started your day by working on whatever you were supposed to be covering, and then after the meeting, you go back to working on it, conduct interviews, make phone calls, wait for people to call you back, make emails, wait for people to email you back.
Yeah, right.
And write.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's just basic reporting. It's the same kind of thing that you guys do at the Walnut Hills with the school newspaper. You're reporting stories. You're talking to people. You're talking to sources. And I mean, that's what I do a lot, is just talk to sources covering politics, because you've got to, people aren't just going to dump things in your lap. They'll dump the stuff that they want out there, but stuff that they don't want out there. You have to develop the kind of sources that will tell you about that, so that you can write it and follow it and develop it into a real story.
How do you conduct a good interview with someone that you don't have an idea where their story's going?
Well, we're all human, right? We can all find common ground. So you find that you cultivate, when you have a conversation. We didn't know each other before we sat down today, but here we are having a conversation.
you do things.
Yeah.
I mean, you try to you treat people like, you know,
Like you want to be
you
treated.
want to be
and like
treated.
people.
Right, exactly. I mean, I would go in and if, like to the Board of Elections, if there was somebody new working behind the desk that I needed to cultivate as a source or something, she might have a photograph of her grandchildren on her desk. And I said, these are the most beautiful kids I've ever seen in my life. And, you know, I had her just like that, you know. Or she'd have Cincinnati Reds stuff, and we'd start talking about baseball, which I like a lot.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, you try to relate to people, you know, just on a human level. You know, you don't go in there just marching in and saying, what do you think about that? No, you treat them like human beings. You try to be friendly and courteous and, you know, likable. And then people open up and talk to you, right?
The last question you should always ask is there anything else that you want to tell me, or is there anything I haven't asked you that I should ask about? Because you get a lot of, you know, meat there that you may not have thought to ask about, but the person goes, well, you know, also blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
People love talking about themselves.
Right, or whatever it is they're doing. So it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, and you might get another story out of it.
Yep.
You know.
Another really good question is, what misconceptions do you think people have about whatever it is that you're talking about? That's a good one. Put that in your toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the next step for journalism education? What programs would you look to take? What degrees, etc.?
Well, obviously, journalism classes, that's a given, but also don't think that you shouldn't take your math classes, because a lot of journalism now and a lot of the future journalism is data-based, data journalism. And so you need to be able to understand those numbers when you see huge spreadsheets of data and be able to analyze that on your own. Of course, you can ask for assistance, but so I really think that's a wise choice. Science classes, same thing, as we're looking, you know, such big topics as climate change and weather patterns and everything that are going on. To be able to understand that, it's good to be well-rounded.
I in college did like a double major, journalism and American history. And when it comes right down to it, I learned the most from American history, the stuff that I could use as background, because once I got out in the professional world and I started writing about politics particularly, and elections and that sort of thing, if I didn't understand what had happened before, how am I going to understand what's going on today? You know, because, you know, these things are not, everything's connected to something that happened in the past. You know, we have a history. So I always recommend to people who are going to go off to college and study journalism, that's good, study journalism, do that, work for the radio station at the college that you go to, or the newspaper at the college you go to, get some practical experience, but also study history, because history is going to give you a grounding, so that, you know, when you start tackling certain stories, you're going to know something about the background of them and how they started and how they generated.
Is it better to double major with journalism and history, or minor in history, or just choose another major in general? Like, some journalists have a degree in law along with their journalism,
Oh, yeah.
or engineering.
That can be valuable.
Yeah. So what do you recommend for students that maybe want a broader learning experience, journalism, history, what other?
I mean, I personally think it's different for every person.
Right,
It's
yeah.
different for everybody. Everybody doesn't have to be a double major, or, you know, have a minor in this or a minor in that. But I think it does, in most cases, help, depending on what kind of journalism you want to do. You know, if you want to go write about medicine and health issues, you know, that might be a good minor. is to, take some of those kind of classes.
I think you also need to think about being well-rounded in general, though, because you may
Right.
want to write
Exactly.
about politics, or you may want to write about medicine or
But you'll-
health, but you may end up writing about sports because that's what the openings are when you get out of college. So you need to be a well-rounded
Oh yeah, that's right.
individual.
Yeah, you got to, as a reporter, and I don't care where what medium you work for. When you start out, you're going to be a general assignment reporter, period. And they're going to throw everything at you that you can imagine, all kinds of stories. And some of them you're not going to know a thing about, but you're going to have to know how to do the research, find out the background, and then, work the story. So the broader your education, the better. Because it's not just about journalism. There's only so much journalism that and I believe this, there's only so much journalism that you can learn in a classroom, okay? You learn most of journalism when you go out and do it. And that's how I did it in college. And I used to get in trouble with all my college professors because I would borrow a car in Athens, Ohio, and drive 2 hours to Columbus and cover the State House. And I watched all the political reporters in the State House and how they did their jobs, and I learned from them. And it was like the best learning experience in the world. And I'd come back and I'd miss a few days of classes. Yeah. I'm not bragging about this.
Stay in school.
I don't recommend this now. But, the professor would say, well, where have you been, Mr. Wilkinson? Nice of you to stop by today. And I'd say, well, did you read the front page of the newspaper today? Because I had a big story on it. So I'm not saying cut classes. Okay? Don't get me wrong. But there is you have to think about the practical aspects of this, and you have to go out and actually do it. That's the best way to learn.
What's your advice for new journalists that haven't really gone into the journalism world?
Preparation is the key thing. It's not, nobody likes to go up and talk to someone they don't know and be like, here, tell me all your secrets, right?
Yeah, right.
But be prepared. Know your stuff so that you feel confident in the questions that you're asking. And
and approach people in a manner that is going to make them want to talk to you.
Be friendly, know your
be
stuff.
friendly. Yeah, be
Know
friendly.
your stuff, and just take a big deep breath and jump in the deep end.
Right. Don't go out and be barking at people. Just be friendly, and you'd be amazed how people will open up to you.
What do you think is the role of an editor in the bigger picture of journalism? Like controlling the message of their publication?
Well, I think the editor's job essentially is, it's not controlling the message, it's making the message understandable and making it as good as it can possibly be. Some reporters need very little editing. Other reporters need more editing.
Sometimes it is the editor's job to help the reporter who's maybe been working on something and has gotten kind of in
focus.
They're really super focused. Sometimes it's the editor's job to either, if they're not focused enough, to get them focused, or to help them think about what they're maybe not seeing in the story. Have you really thought about this angle over here? Is there something that you're missing maybe?
Yeah.
What are like a couple stories you're really proud of? The ones that you look back on really fondly.
I'm really proud of some reporting I did around the Fernald Nuclear Center, which is in northwest Hamilton County. They made uranium, they processed uranium during the Cold War for weapons, and then in about the 80s they realized that all of that nuclear waste was going into the water system and poisoning the people that lived around the facility. So when I came into reporting on it, they were doing the cleanup of that. And I really covered a lot of the cleanup in terms of making the ground safe, making the water safe, and then rehabbing the facility because now it's a park. And a big part of that was returning it to the wetland that it used to be. And so I went out looking for salamanders with some scientists, and it was just a great day out in the mud looking for these salamanders because that would be the sign that everything that they had been doing was really taking off. And that's probably been almost 10 years since I've done that story, and it's still one of my most favorite pieces.
Well, did you find the salamanders?
We did find salamanders, and that's why it's a successful, park nature area preserve there now. This is the work that went in then.
I don't know. I mean, there have been so many stories that I've done, and a lot of them, and the politics stuff I love. It's been great, and I've had a lot of opportunities to travel around the country and, travel with candidates and that sort of thing. But that's, and that's important. That's something I wanted to do. But I think the ones that affected me the most and the ones that I remember the most are the ones about people that I've written about. I can remember years ago for the Enquirer seeing a police report on a homeless woman who had died on the sidewalk on Spring Grove Avenue. Her body was found outside of a factory and on a very, very cold night, and nobody knew who she was. And I went out and I spent the day. I went over to some homeless shelters. I went to some of the camps down on the river, showing them pictures of her. And I finally found out who she was. And I found out from other homeless people that she had a daughter who was there in the city of Cincinnati, and I found her and talked to her about her and told her story. That, this was a human being. This was a person who had a real life and had a family and at one time was fairly successful, and she ended up dying in the street in the cold. And I told that story, and it affected me, and I know it affected a whole lot of people that read it, because they started, you couldn't do a story like that, you couldn't write a story like that, you couldn't read a story like that, and not start thinking differently about the homeless people that you see on the street every day, and don't give them a thought. But now, that to me was one of the stories I'll never forget.
Yeah, there's so much that I didn't know about journalism, how that some of these really deep stories can affect you forever and will change how you write about journalism.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the future of journalism, I remember when I was in 7th grade, it looked like journalism was going downhill.
Yeah.
Didn't look like there was much of a future. And just the last year, really, there's a big uptick in people paying attention to journalism, a lot of new writing, and it's really got my hopes up a little bit about the profession in general.
Good.
One of the things I've always noticed about your group is that everybody is eager to learn. Nobody ever balks at the idea of, learning something new. And that is going to make for some very good journalists someday, because that's part of the deal, is you got to always have an open mind and be willing to learn. And you guys have shown that to me over the last several years as I've worked out there. And I think it's great. I mean, it makes me feel good because I'm not going to do this forever.
Right.
And it makes me feel good that it's going to be left in good hands.
But you don't have to go to Walnut Hills to be
Oh, no, of
good,
course.
too.
Oh, no.
So people
Absolutely
who are
not.
watching right now, wherever you go to school, you make the most of your
Yes,
education.
absolutely.
If you don't have a paper, start your
Start one.
paper.
Start
There you
one.
go.
Yeah.
Or your school radio station.
Yeah. If anything, this conversation has, further elevated my want to be a journalist, because there's so much out there for us, and people may never know about what's going on in the world if it wasn't for us. We could make a real difference, and I think that's pretty cool.
That's exactly right. That's what it's all about.
We hope you've enjoyed seeing some different perspectives on the role of journalism in our democracy. Our goal has been to expose you to information that will guide your decision making as you exercise your responsibilities as a member of our democracy and as you consider your own career path. Our goal is to arm you with skills needed to consume and process information and news stories from an ever-growing number of sources in both traditional media and modern media reporting. As you consider career choices, we certainly hope that we've impressed upon you the importance of journalists in a free and open society. Informing the public is an exciting and vitally important way to keep democracy alive and well for our future generations. On behalf of WVXU, I wish you the best of luck in whatever opportunities you explore, wherever your life takes you.